I'll start, and if other people may well drop in as they come through the checkout and get their bags sorted out. So, first things first, shiny thing, yay! We got a new shiny thing. We got a nice new shiny logo. We haven't had a logo for the Lava team ever. But we actually got one together, Sentinel and his family put the initial idea together, we played around with it a bit, and we've now got it everywhere. You'll see it on every page for Lava Server. You'll see it on every page of the documentation. You'll see it every time we do slides in future for this kind of thing. It'll be everywhere. You'll get quite used to it, and you'll know by then what it means, and it'll just become obvious. So the hope with V2 is that we are going to solve a lot of problems that everybody's had with V1. And if we do provide something that actually fixes the problems that we all know about, I've all been struggling with for ages, then it's thanks to the entire team. It's not just, I'm the one standing up here, but there's so many other people who've actually put the work in over the years. We've been at this for over 3 years now, and it's going to take us a little bit longer before we actually get rid of the original code that's just sitting around. And V2 is the future. It's not as if we're planning a V3. V2 is the design that's going to take us through the next stages. There's no reason we found yet to have any consideration of another big change like this. So you can afford to invest the time to get used to the new development workflow, get used to the way that the classes work together, how the jobs all work together, and build other more complex things on top of Lava, which is how we've seen Git CI, kernel CI doing all this kind of work. These kinds of big migrations are difficult when you start doing that, and that's where Lava fits in. We are a part of your CI. You can't expect Lava to do everything for you. We do the automation and we can run the tests for you, but the actual, the builds have to be done somewhere else. The reporting is best done in another way. Take the data from Lava, put it into another front end that matches your team's needs. Then you get to actually get useful results back. So that's what V2 is trying to support. Be much better and much more focused on what Lava does best. So what have we got in V2 now? What have we actually been working on? So the recent stuff, I just realized that actual preview is too small for me, so I'm going to have to turn around anyway. The most recent stuff to go in is the high key support on AOSP. There are still issues to work through within the actual firmware builds at the moment, and some of the other lab issues, but the code itself is actually fine now for the high key support. That allows us to move on and add a whole range of other fastboot-based devices. Juno support, we have working support for Juno when the Juno is using U-boot. So actually replacing the Juno firmware in each test job is going to take a little bit longer. That's a complex set of code to actually rewrite, but that is in progress. And the big advantage we've got with V2 is these containers. It makes a lot of things a lot simpler. So many of the problems with V1 have been because we haven't been able to properly manage situations where you need a little bit of custom software between the dispatcher and the device, or you need that little bit of help there, you need that little bit of thing over there, a little bit of extra scripting. The temptation in V1 was to try and force that into the dispatcher code. We're not doing that with V2. We're giving you something that you can control per test job, set it up exactly as you want for that test job, and you can have whatever code you can download. There are no restrictions on needing it to work with the dispatcher code or needing to do this, that, the other. You've got a standard test shell. You are constrained because it's a container by the kernel you're actually running on the dispatcher. That's not your choice, but apart from that, you can do a lot with that. And it also allows us to add these kinds of monitor test, where you just sit there and watch what comes out over the serial console. We don't need a POSIX shell type login environment anymore for certain kinds of tests. You can't necessarily swap them over easily, but for particular kinds of testing, we can do these kinds of bare metal and monitoring type. The overdrive, we have managed to get working support for that in. Now we've only got one device in any of the instances of Lava, so that's a bit problematic, but we have got that. And the publishing API is the way we are now handling attachments. What used to be as attachments and is a lot more flexible than that, because it allows you to push anything, any artifact from the test job itself to a particular resource. Our publishing API is a short-term host that allows you to have a default that you can just push things through, but you can use the same API to push to a server you've set up yourself. So for storage reasons, the publishing API has a limit. You'll only have 30 days with that file actually there at that URL, but you can push it to any other site or take it from the publishing API location and put it on other resources if you need further lifespan of that sort of support. And what we're coming to for current production, we've got a whole range of devices that are already supported. These are already running regular test jobs through on staging or if not on production themselves. And one big change is going to be the KVM device type and the QEMU ARM, QEMU MIPS, QEMU this, that, the other. All of those are merging into one. It's something V2 allows us to do, to have one device type and put some logic in there that allows it to actually behave in different ways. So you specify the architecture to match the files you're giving in your test job, and then the device type works out, I need to use that binary rather than that binary to try and launch QEMU. Now, during Connect, we've been checking out the remaining device types. So D01, we don't know yet. We're still working out whether people actually really care about the D01, whether we need to do the work to integrate that into V2. Nexus 10, that should just work as a fastboot device with LXC. The high silicon set-top box, we've worked out that should be able to integrate into V2 as well, probably by the time of the next release. High bank is a U-boot type class. Again, that should be in for the next release. There's only one midway node in the production lab in Cambridge at the moment, and they've fairly safe to think that that's the only midway in Lava anywhere, probably. Yeah. We're not sure. I think that's going to get retired when we actually move to V2, unless someone can come up with a really good use case for why they need Lava on the midway when they've got the high bank. Fast models, a lot of support, new code going into that at the request of ARM, and it's going to be a similar kind of deployment to the QEMU, where you've got lots more flexibility about which model you're launching, exactly how you're launching it, and all the kind of options, because the list of possible options per model changes every release. So there's no point trying to script that a lot in the Lava side, just hand it all over to the test writer. It does, like a lot more of V2, it puts a lot more control into the hands of the test writer. It also means the test writer has to actually do a bit more work to understand and to get the best out of the device type they're actually using. But then V1 got into too much trouble trying to use helpers that helped that person and then got in the way of everybody else. T-Shark and Vayu, if there is a use case for their continued use in the lab, then we can look at integrating those two. But at the moment, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in doing CI on those two devices. So how's the migration going to work? We're going to start, when we get back from Connect, actually getting the last devices on production working with V2. our staging instance is going to start moving to exclusive V2, which has a slight impact on how much we test V1, but then that's a cost we will actually carry on. So IFC 6410, yeah, looks like there's actually going to be some support for that. The Dragon Boat 410C looks as if we can do that along the same lines as the high key. We haven't got support for that yet, but that will be coming. IPMI BMC type support is waiting for suitable hardware that we can actually test whether the ideas we've got will actually work. Once we've got some hardware in the lab that can do BMC, we have some in one instance, we don't have some in production or in staging. The biggest part of the ongoing work is going to be documentation. There's a lot of documentation additions coming in the next release, and there'll be further. Is that better? Hi. So, yeah, the next step would then be to make all devices on all instances work with V2. So that will just be the remaining ones I highlighted earlier about making sure those are all set up. And then V2 health checks. So currently there's a mix of V1 and V2 health checks in the lab. Those will just move through as V2 only. And then we start actually cutting off certain parts of V1. So the first step in that is to make some devices V2 only in production. We will only do that when we've got V2 health checks and we've talked to the relevant teams and make sure that they're happy and they've got their CI loops and their other submission steps fixed and working with V2. Once we've got some more of those, of the wider range of device types as exclusive to V2, then we start thinking about a timeline to make sure that all the teams have enough results in V2 that they can forget and lose the V1 results. Think of that might be 3 months, we don't know. We'll have to see how that actually goes. The most important thing with this is that everybody using Lava, if you have an account on any Lava instance at all, you should be on the Lava announced mailing list. Everybody. Particularly during the migration. It's very low volume, it's only announcements from us. There'll be at least one email with, for each release, but there's also going to be emails that saying we're turning this device to V2 only. We're taking away this bit of support. We're doing this. We're starting to delete data. You need to be on that list to understand what's going to be happening with some of your data, your test jobs, and that's what we'll be asking people as well. Look, we're thinking of doing this next cycle. Tell us if you're not ready. Yes. Yeah. So
For example, the D03 will it have V1 support?
I'm currently working on D03 integration and I'm starting with V2. Yeah.
Only V2.
So once we've got through a range of these devices being V2 only, then we can actually turn off V1 submissions. We'll just do it in the XML RPC API and in the web UI. That will be announced in advance. We'll make sure everybody knows, but at that point, any V1 JSON submission will be rejected by the server. The queue, if there is a queue, will have cleared by then. You'll only be able to submit V2. That allows us to actually get to the meat of the migration, which is to start removing the V1 code from our side. That still has implications for users because it's the code that supports the data. If the code is removed, and it has to be removed, the data is going to go away. So V1 data is going to be deleted. Now, there are ways of handling this. If you really, really want archive V1 data, then talk to the lab team, do some exports, put it in another instance somewhere, and keep it in a separate instance. But the instances that are run by the Lava lab team, the instances that upgrade to each of the Lava releases, they will start deleting V1 data. That covers test case results from JSON submissions. It covers bundles, bundle streams, image reports, filters, and image reports 2.0. All of those things will disappear. Now, the way we'll do that, obviously, has to be working top down. So your image reports 2.0, and filters will disappear first. Then we can delete bundle streams, then bundles, then test case results. But that is a permanent deletion. That data is going to go away for good. And that gets us to the point where we finally release without any V1 code. We've got a lot of tasks in Jira at the moment, lots of things planned in an epic that's marked as post-migration. This is why we are pushing so hard to get rid of the V1 code. It is actively blocking things that users actually want from V2. We've got a lot of support in V2 already, but we actually need to get the V1 code out of the way before we can actually deliver the rest of V2. Yeah.
Do you guys see that there will be enough time for us to set up something equivalent to current image reports, to gather enough trends and results so that we can do the switch over?
So that 3 months time frame that I referred to is 3 months question mark, because we want to make sure that that is enough time for people. But yes, that is going to be a case of we will retain the V1 data until all teams have got sufficient V2 results. And by results, I mean that you've got enough to actually follow the trends. And so that's using charts which are based on V2 data. So you still have a graphical representation, but it needs to be migrated over because the base class of the data has changed.
Yeah, because you say filters are gone, image reports too are gone. So there will be something else in V2 that I will be able to set up my trends and tell you, looks good, we can move over.
And that support is already on production. What you lack is actually the relevant result data to make it useful to you. But on production at the moment, yeah, and in production at the moment, you've got results, queries, and charts. So you could experiment with building queries and building charts. We are currently improving the documentation on exactly how that's done, right? But it's very similar because it is a port of Image Reports 2.0. It's ported to the new data sets. That's the bulk of the change.
Yeah, I think that would work for us. Yeah, thanks.
Right. That's all I actually had on there. I know there's a lot of scary stuff in those slides about deleting data forever. We do mean it. But we will take all steps we can to make sure that everybody is fully aware of when it's going to happen. So it shouldn't catch anybody by surprise as long as you're on the mailing list. I really can't stress that enough. If you're not going to be on that list, you are going to lose out, and your admin's going to upgrade Lava, and suddenly your data has gone away. Are there any questions?
What the plans are in V2 in terms of moving to an LXC model or Docker model of deployment of Lava itself and the dispatcher.
So that's happening independently. Tyler and Alan are doing that for their own support on that, and it'll be a lot easier to make that a smooth deployment once we get the V1 code out of the way. There are numerous hurdles in the V1 code that make it difficult and hacky to actually get that kind of deployment, and there's lots of little helper scripts that are needed. But once we've got rid of the V1 code, then we can integrate those helpers properly, and then you've got a nice smooth way of doing those deployments.
Okay, yeah, I got Tyler's Git and Docker files on that stuff, so I'm going through that, but I ran into a couple of snags with it already in building the Docker image.
Yeah.
So the sooner you can enable that you're nightly actually trying to generate that Docker image and seeing these failures that come up just because versions get bumped and things like that,
Yeah.
it'll make it more
So-
seamless to do a new deployment and to do updates.
Yeah.
In
I mean, we do, every day we put jobs through staging which simulate a fresh install and an install that upgrades from Jesse to what's in the current staging. So we are constantly monitoring that, but we do that in a full VM rather than a container. But in terms of the actual packaging dependencies and all those kinds of issues, it's exactly the same. So those kinds of things, the only time you actually get problems is going to be when it's specific to something that Docker needs that isn't in the normal setup. So I think that relates to not so much the package dependencies of the installation, but actually the ability to add device types and add devices and that kind of thing. Those kinds of helpers are probably where those kinds of things start to go wrong. And those are the ones that we will be implementing in our code as well, but it's just that some of them will really be just as flaky if the V1 code is there.
Right. And the other thing is on the dispatcher side, I really like what's being done with the LXC and handing off to LXC to do it.
Yep.
But I actually was trying to create a Docker when I was deploying the dispatcher about a couple months ago. And the problem I ran into was that LXC wasn't running because I was already running in a container, the dispatcher, because I deployed it that way using Docker. And then when it started up LXC, they weren't happy together. So
Yeah, I'm not sure how we actually solve that problem because it's not the same as running a VM inside a VM. There
Yeah.
are other problems there that
Actually,
So recent,
there is a possibility of running a contingency in the container, like specifically LXC does that. You need to have a simple bit of configuration in terms of the networking which happens so that it takes up, but there is a possibility of running like recursive containers with the help of LXC. So yeah, you can do that.
Okay, anything else? So it was very nice to have Ricos talk earlier in the week showing a worked development using V2. It showed that so many of the things we've put into this are actually the right way of doing things and really are helping people get these things delivered. So it's already fixing problems that were impossible to fix in V1. Yeah.
with regards to the archiving of the old data, I know it's been discussed. I wonder if there's been a decision on the idea of leaving the old validation just as is, stop, chop, stop accepting any new jobs, but leave all the old data sitting there spinning, and then start a new one for just V2.
So this is the idea that V2 on validation Linaro would restart job number 1. We haven't decided that. There hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, enough of a call from users to consider that. And it's something we can still think about. The consequence of that, of course, is that that makes it a big flag day and everything has to move at the same time because you've got devices that are now
Yeah, they can't be on both.
invisible to V1. So the archive of current production using V1 stuff would have to be read-only. Scheduler wouldn't be running, none of the devices would be online, they'd all be offline or retired. The data would be there, but it means that, so a gradual migration is what I'm planning at the moment, unless people come up with a really good use case why they actually need to have a flag day. Because a gradual migration means that users like Riku can already run V2 jobs and count on that data still being there in a year's time, 2 years' time. It's part of the nature of the way that the deployments had to work is that certain deployments are easier to write up and test and validate. The next level of deployments build on that, so you end up having to stagger the introduction of the code that supports various ways of deploying devices, which ends up with, you get early adopters putting data in at the earlier stage. But that in itself is valuable to us because we can do all the testing we want, but we're testing from a particular perspective. We're not testing from trying to get useful results out of the test job for the benefit of the test job itself. We're trying to just test our code. So it's really useful to have those kinds of early jobs as well. But yeah, that was an idea at the early stage. We were thinking about doing that. Some of the reasons for doing that were actually due to complications on production itself with the size of the queue, and we fixed that a different way.
So then a related but I guess different option, is there any sensible way we could keep the V1 test results around from V2?
Yes, again, it's a question of at what point do you do that, because keeping that mirror constantly synchronized is not something that I would envisage V1 being particularly happy with. It means a lot of synchronization of test logs and things like that. So we can certainly, during that final 3-month period when we're trying to make sure the teams have enough results, we can actually allow for some V1 data to be on an instance for a period of time. That's up to people to negotiate with Dave and the lab team, is the case of if you want that kind of resource.
No, I actually meant on the same instance.
No. Basically, we must remove the V1 code. We don't have any way of preserving V1 data once the code object has gone. The database will remove the data. Log files will still exist. That's up to the lab team to decide when they want to remove the log files.
Doesn't it make more sense to make a read-only snapshot of the V1 data when you stop?
That's exactly what we're planning to do. So we'll do a complete backup snapshot. There'll be an instance, like it'll probably be something like v1.validation.linaro.org that will just persist forever, and we won't ever update that, obviously. It'll just be frozen in time. So that's my intention anyway.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, my voice is going.
Okay. Anybody else? Thanks very much.